Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UE's Vengeance, watching the stars through the large window. His ship was 3 days out from the human colony of New Boston, carrying supplies and messages to the outer settlements. It was supposed to be a quiet mission, the kind that let him catch up on reports and enjoy the peace of deep space. The quiet ended when his communications officer, Lieutenant Carol Smith, looked up from her station with a worried face. "Captain, we're getting a transmission from the Zephyrian Empire. It's marked as urgent and addressed to all human vessels." Jake frowned. The Zephyrians were a cold, logical species that ruled a large part of this sector. They had been getting more hostile toward human expansion lately, but they usually sent their messages through proper diplomatic channels. "Put it on screen, Lieutenant." The main display flickered to life, showing a sterile white chamber. Several tall, gray-skinned aliens sat behind a curved desk, their large black eyes staring directly at the camera. Jake recognized the setup immediately. It was a Zephyrian tribunal chamber. "Citizens of the human species," the center alien spoke in perfect, emotionless English. "I am Judge Kralseth of the Zephyrian Empire. You will observe the consequences of your aggressive expansion into our territory." The camera moved to show a small figure in the center of the chamber. Jake's blood turned cold. It was a human child, a little girl who couldn't be more than 10 years old. She had short brown hair and wore a simple blue dress that was torn and dirty. Her hands were bound behind her back, but she stood straight, looking around the chamber with wide, frightened eyes. "This is Lucy Adams, offspring of your diplomatic representatives who violated our space without permission. They attempted to establish unauthorized contact with our border worlds." Jake gripped the armrest of his captain's chair. Every person on the bridge stood perfectly still, staring at the screen. The little girl looked so small and alone in that vast chamber. "The human diplomats were captured and are being held according to our laws. However, their offspring will serve as an example to your species. You humans claim to value the lives of your young above all else. We will test this claim." The judge's voice never changed. It remained flat and cold, as if he was reading a weather report instead of threatening a child's life. "Your species has 30 of your minutes to withdraw all human vessels from Zephyrian space and cease all expansion activities in our sector. If you fail to comply, the offspring will be executed as punishment for your aggression." Lucy looked directly at the camera then, as if she could see through it to all the humans watching. Her voice was small but clear. "Mommy? Daddy? I'm scared. Please come get me." Jake felt his hands shake. Around the bridge, he could see his crew members with tears in their eyes. Lieutenant Smith had her hand over her mouth, and the young ensign at the weapons station was gripping his console so hard his knuckles were white. Messages began flooding in from human ships and colonies across the sector. Every human settlement, every ship, every station was receiving the same transmission. The Zephyrians were broadcasting this to everyone. "Captain," Smith said quietly, "we're getting emergency transmissions from the Colonial Council. They're trying to negotiate." On the screen, Judge Kralseth received a message on a small device. He looked at it without expression. "The human leadership has responded. They offer to discuss terms and make agreements. This is unacceptable. We do not negotiate with species that refuse to respect our borders." The judge stood up, his tall frame casting a shadow over the small girl. Other Zephyrians moved around the chamber, setting up what looked like recording equipment. "Your 30 minutes have expired. Your species has failed to comply with our demands. The execution will proceed as scheduled." Jake wanted to look away, but he couldn't. None of them could. They were too far away to do anything, too far to help. All they could do was watch. Lucy was led to the center of the chamber. She looked up at the tall aliens around her, then back at the camera. Tell Mommy and Daddy I love them. Tell them I wasn't scared at the end. But she was scared. Jake could see it in her eyes, in the way her small hands shook. She was just a little girl, far from home, surrounded by aliens who saw her as nothing more than a tool to frighten humanity. The execution was quick. The Zephyrians used some kind of energy weapon that left no mess, no drama. One moment, Lucy was standing there, brave and small and human. The next moment, she was gone. The transmission ended with Judge Krolseth staring into the camera. Let this serve as a warning to your species. We are not like you. We do not value individual lives over the order of our society. Any further human expansion into our territory will result in similar consequences. The screen went black. The bridge of the Vengeance was completely silent. Jake stared at the dark screen, his mind trying to process what he had just witnessed. They had killed a child. They had murdered a 10-year-old girl and broadcast it to every human in the galaxy. Captain? Smith's voice was barely a whisper. Jake turned to look at his crew. Every face showed the same expression: shock, grief, and something else. Something darker. Sir, we're receiving priority messages from Fleet Command. All ships are being recalled to their home bases immediately. Jake nodded slowly. He understood why. The Zephyrians thought they had sent a message that would terrify humanity into submission. They thought that by killing one child, they would show humans how powerless they were. They were wrong. Set course for Earth. Maximum speed, Jake ordered. His voice was calm, but there was steel in it that hadn't been there before. As the Vengeance turned toward home, Jake looked out at the stars again. Somewhere out there, Lucy Adams' parents were learning that their daughter was dead. Somewhere out there, billions of humans were seeing the same images he had just witnessed. The Zephyrians had wanted to send a message. They had succeeded. But the message humanity received was not the one they had intended to send. Admiral Kate Sullivan had been in meetings for 6 straight hours, but she wasn't tired. None of the humans in the Colonial Council chamber were tired. They were running on something much stronger than rest. They were running on rage. The emergency session had been called within minutes of the broadcast ending. Representatives from every human colony, every fleet, every settlement had gathered either in person or by long-range communication. The chamber was packed with people who had all seen the same terrible thing. The motion is on the floor, announced Council President Bill Rogers. His voice was steady, but his hands shook slightly as he held the papers. Declaration of war against the Zephyrian Empire. All in favor? Every hand in the chamber went up. Not one person hesitated. Motion carries unanimously. Kate looked around the room at faces she had known for years. These were diplomats, scientists, merchants, and farmers. They were people who had spent their lives building peaceful colonies and trading with other species. But something had changed in all of them. Something had broken and been rebuilt into something harder. Admiral Sullivan, President Rogers said, "You have complete authority to mobilize our military forces. Whatever you need, you'll get it." Kate stood up. She had been preparing for this moment since the broadcast ended, but now that it was here, she felt the weight of it. "Thank you, Mr. President. I need to speak with Dr. Richard Hayes about the Zephyrian psychology profile. We need to understand how they think." Dr. Hayes was already waiting in the briefing room next door. He was a tall man with gray hair who had spent 20 years studying alien cultures. He looked older than he had that morning. "Kate, I've been going over everything we know about the Zephyrians. I think I understand what happened. Tell me." Hayes pulled up a holographic display showing Zephyrian society structure. "They're a species that puts logic above everything else. They don't understand emotions the way we do. To them, our love for our children looks like a weakness. Kate felt her jaw tighten. They thought killing Lucy would make us back down. Exactly. In their society, one individual doesn't matter compared to the needs of the whole group. They calculated that by killing one human child, they would terrify our entire species into giving up our expansion. They were wrong. They were very wrong. But Kate, that's not all. I've been studying their military records. They've used this tactic before with other species. It's always worked. Kate stared at the display. Other species abandoned their territory. When the Zephyrians killed their young, every single time. The Zephyrians have a perfect track record with this strategy. They've never encountered a species that responded the way we're about to respond. The door opened, and Colonel Lisa Grant entered. She was a short woman with sharp eyes who ran the military's most classified projects. She looked like she hadn't slept, but her expression was focused. Admiral, Project Nightfall is ready for activation. Kate nodded. Project Nightfall was something they had hoped never to use. It was a complete warfare system designed specifically for fighting alien species that didn't think like humans. How long do we need for full mobilization? The new ship designs can be ready in 2 months. The weapon systems are already in production. But Admiral, that's not the impressive part. What do you mean? Lisa pulled up her own display showing recruitment numbers. We've had 3 million people volunteer for military service since the broadcast ended. That's just in the first 6 hours. The shipyards are already working double shifts without being asked. Every human colony is converting their factories to military production. Kate looked at the numbers. It was incredible. Humanity was mobilizing for war faster than any species in recorded history. There's something else, Lisa continued. The civilian response is unlike anything we've ever seen. People are donating their savings, their ships, their equipment. Children are making care packages for soldiers. Artists are creating propaganda posters. Everyone wants to help. Dr. Hayes brought up another display. Kate, you need to understand something. The Zephyrians can't comprehend this response. Their psychology doesn't allow for it. They see individual sacrifice for the group as logical, but they don't understand emotional bonding. What does that mean for us? It means they won't be prepared for the kind of war we're about to fight. They'll expect us to follow their rules, to fight logically and strategically. They won't understand that we're not fighting for territory or resources. Kate understood. We're fighting for Lucy Adams. We're fighting for every human child who might face what Lucy faced. And that's something the Zephyrians can't calculate or prepare for. The meeting was interrupted by Kate's aide, Lieutenant Commander Joe Parker. He looked excited. Admiral, you need to see this. We're getting reports from across human space. He activated the main display, showing news feeds from dozens of human worlds. Every channel was showing the same things: massive crowds gathering in city centers, people holding signs with Lucy's picture, families hugging their children. The phrase "Remember Lucy Adams" is spreading everywhere. It's becoming a rallying cry. Kate watched the displays. On New Terra, a crowd of 50,000 people had gathered in the Capitol Square. On Mars Colony, workers had painted Lucy's name on the side of a battleship under construction. On the orbital stations around Jupiter, children were making drawings of the little girl who had died so far from home. Admiral, Joe continued, we're also getting reports from other species. The Centauri Union wants to know if we need support. The Andromedan Free States are offering to share intelligence about Zephyrian military capabilities. Kate was surprised. Other species want to help us? Dr. Hayes nodded. The Zephyrians have used this tactic against other species before. A lot of alien cultures are horrified by what they did. Even species that don't think like us understand that executing a child for political reasons is wrong. Colonel Grant pulled up the military readiness reports. Admiral, we can have the first wave of ships ready in 6 weeks. The new weapon systems are designed specifically to counter Zephyrian advantages. What about their psychology? Can we use that against them? Dr. Hayes and I have been working on that. We've developed information warfare tactics that should be very effective against their logical mindset. Kate looked around the room at her team. These were good people, smart people who had dedicated their lives to protecting humanity. Now they were preparing for the largest military operation in human history. How many ships will we have? The first wave will be 400 vessels. By the time we're fully mobilized, we'll have over 1,000 ships and 2 million soldiers. Kate felt something cold settle in her stomach. It wasn't fear. It was determination. Colonel Grant, I want you to prepare a message for the Zephyrian leadership. Tell them we're coming. Tell them what they did to Lucy Adams will not be forgotten or forgiven. What should the message say? Kate looked at the displays showing human worlds preparing for war. She thought about a little girl in a blue dress who had died alone and afraid, far from home. Tell them they opened the gates of hell. General Paul Rodriguez stood in the massive hangar bay of the New York Orbital Shipyard, watching the construction of the largest military fleet in human history. The sound of welding and machinery filled the air as thousands of workers built ships that would carry humanity's answer to the Zephyrian Empire. It had been 2 months since Lucy Adams died. 2 months of the most intense military preparation any species had ever undertaken. The shipyard that had once built cargo vessels and passenger liners now produced warships around the clock. General, called Engineer Amy Chun, walking across the hangar floor. She was a small woman with oil-stained coveralls and bright eyes. The new weapon systems are ready for testing. Paul followed her to a testing area where a prototype weapon was mounted on a stand. It looked like a normal energy cannon, but Paul knew it was much more than that. We call it the Harmony Disruptor, Amy explained. Dr. Hayes helped us understand how Zephyrian minds work. They think in very organized, logical patterns. This weapon doesn't just damage their ships. It creates electromagnetic interference that disrupts their thought processes. It drives them insane? Not exactly. It makes them confused and unable to think clearly. Imagine trying to solve a math problem while someone is playing loud music and flashing lights in your face. Paul nodded. It was cruel, but the Zephyrians had made cruelty necessary when they killed a child on live broadcast. How many ships will carry these weapons? Every ship in the fleet. We've also developed new armor that's specifically designed to counter their energy weapons. Paul looked out at the construction. Hundreds of ships were being built, from massive battleships to small fighter craft. Each one was designed with a single purpose: to make the Zephyrians pay for what they had done. Any word from the training facilities? Commander Steve Williams says the new recruits are ready. General, I've never seen anything like it. These people are motivated in a way that's almost scary. Paul understood. He had visited the training camps and seen the soldiers preparing for war. They weren't just fighting for territory or politics. They were fighting because they had all seen a little girl die, and they couldn't let that stand. His communication device buzzed. General Rodriguez, please report to the command center. Priority message from Admiral Sullivan. Paul made his way through the shipyard to the command center, where a large holographic display showed the positions of human and Zephyrian forces throughout the sector. Admiral Sullivan appeared on the communication screen, speaking from her flagship. Paul, we've received intelligence about the Zephyrian response to our military buildup. They're confused. Confused how? They don't understand why we're mobilizing such a large force. Their intelligence analysts are trying to figure out what strategic advantage we're seeking. Paul almost laughed. They still don't get it. No, they don't. Lieutenant Commander Nancy Davis has been studying their communications. They keep referring to our response as illogical and disproportionate. The display showed intercepted Zephyrian messages. Paul read through them, seeing the alien confusion clearly. They had expected humanity to negotiate, to offer trade agreements or territorial concessions. They hadn't expected an entire species to mobilize for war over the death of one child. Admiral, what about their military preparations? They're increasing patrols and reinforcing their border worlds, but they're not mobilizing for full war. They think this is some kind of negotiation tactic. Paul felt a cold smile cross his face. They're about to learn better. The communication screen switched to show Dr. Hayes, who was aboard the flagship with Admiral Sullivan. He looked tired, but determined. General, I've been analyzing Zephyrian psychology reports. They literally cannot understand our response. In their society, the death of one individual would never justify the kind of military action we're preparing. What does that mean for our strategy? It means they won't be ready for what we're about to do. They'll expect us to follow their rules of warfare. Logical, strategic, limited objectives. They won't understand that we're not fighting for territory. Paul looked at the tactical display showing the Zephyrian Empire. It was a large, well-organized territory with strong defenses and a powerful military. Under normal circumstances, attacking them would be suicide. But these weren't normal circumstances. Dr. Hayes, how do we use their psychology against them? We've developed information warfare tactics that should be very effective. The Zephyrians pride themselves on logical thinking and organized society. If we can disrupt that organization, create chaos in their command structure, they'll have trouble responding effectively. Commander Williams joined the conversation from the training facility on Mars. General, the psychological warfare units are ready. We've trained teams specifically to exploit Zephyrian mental weaknesses. What kind of tactics? Unpredictable attack patterns, emotional displays that confuse their logical thinking, and information campaigns that target their need for order and structure. Paul studied the reports. Everything was coming together. The ships, the weapons, the soldiers, the strategy. Humanity was preparing to fight a war unlike any in galactic history. Admiral Sullivan, when do we launch? Fleet mobilization is complete. In 2 weeks, we'll have 1,200 ships and 2.5 million soldiers. Paul felt the weight of that number. It was the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. All because of one little girl in a blue dress. General, Amy-chan said, approaching with a tablet, we're getting reports from the outer colonies. The Zephyrians sent another message. Paul took the tablet and read the message. It was from the same judge who had ordered Lucy's execution, Judge Kralseth. He was offering to negotiate, to discuss terms for peace. They're scared, Paul said. They should be, Admiral Sullivan responded from the screen. They wanted to send us a message. We're about to send them one back. Paul looked around the command. Center at the men and women preparing for war. They were scientists, engineers, soldiers, and civilians who had all volunteered for this mission. They came from every human world, every walk of life, united by a single purpose. Admiral, have we heard anything from Lucy's parents? Robert and Linda Adams are aboard the flagship. They wanted to be part of the fleet when we reached Zephyrian. Space, Paul nodded. It was fitting that the people who had lost the most would be there to see justice done. General, Dr. Hayes said, there's something else. Other species are watching this conflict very carefully. What we do to the Zephyrians will send a message to the entire galaxy about how humanity responds to threats against our children. Good. Let them watch. Paul looked out at the shipyard where the last of the warships were being completed. In 2 weeks, they would launch the largest military operation in human history. The Zephyrians had thought they were sending a message about power and fear. Instead, They had awakened something in humanity that had been sleeping. They had reminded every human in the galaxy why they fought, why they built colonies, why they reached for the stars. They fought for their children. They built for their future. They reached for the stars so that little girls like Lucy Adams could have a better life. The Zephyrians had taken that away. Now they would pay the price. Captain Danny Wright stood on the bridge of the UE's Retribution, watching the Zephyrian border system grow larger on the main screen. Behind him, 1,100 other human warships moved in perfect formation, the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. "Captain," reported Lieutenant Kelly Johnson from the communications station, "we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian Border Patrol. They're demanding we identify ourselves and state our intentions." Danny looked at the tactical display. The Zephyrian border defenses were impressive. Orbital platforms, patrol ships, and defensive satellites. Under normal circumstances, attacking such a position would be costly and difficult. But these weren't normal circumstances. "Open a channel." "To the Zephyrian patrol," Danny ordered. The main screen showed a Zephyrian officer in a gray uniform. His large black eyes showed no emotion as he spoke. "Human vessels, you are approaching Zephyrian space without authorization. State your purpose or withdraw immediately." Danny stepped forward. "I am Captain Danny Wright of the United Earth Fleet. We are here to collect a debt." The Zephyrian looked confused. "Debt? We have no trade agreements with your species that would require. 3 months ago, you murdered a 10-year-old human child named Lucy Adams. You broadcast her execution to our entire species. That debt." The alien's expression didn't change, but Danny could see him processing the information. "The offspring was executed as a legal consequence of human violations of our territorial sovereignty. This action was within our legal rights." "Legal rights," Danny repeated. "You think you had the legal right to murder a child?" "The action was necessary to demonstrate the consequences of human aggression." Danny felt something cold settle in his chest. Even now, even facing the largest human fleet in history, the Zephyrians couldn't understand what they had done wrong. "Commander Johnson, signal the fleet. Operation Lucy's Justice is now active." The first wave of human ships moved forward, their new weapon systems charging. The Harmony disruptors that engineer Amy Chun had designed began broadcasting interference. Patterns specifically designed to disrupt Zephyrian thought processes. The effect was immediate. On the screen, the Zephyrian patrol officer suddenly looked confused, his orderly thoughts scattered by the electromagnetic interference. What are you doing?" "Our sensors are showing." He stopped, unable to complete the sentence as the weapon interfered with his logical thinking patterns. "We're showing you what happens when you hurt our children," Danny said. The human fleet opened fire. But this wasn't a normal military attack. The humans weren't trying to capture territory or destroy strategic targets. They were delivering a message written in energy weapons and explosive warheads. The Zephyrian border defenses, designed to repel logical military attacks, crumbled under the assault. The orbital platforms had shields and armor, but they weren't prepared for weapons designed specifically to exploit their weaknesses. "Captain," reported the tactical officer, "all border defenses are down. We're receiving surrender signals from the remaining Zephyrian patrol ships." "Ignore them." Signal Commander Alex Turner's ground forces to begin landing operations. On the planet below, human soldiers began landing at key installations. But they weren't there to occupy territory. They were there to capture specific targets. The Zephyrian officials who had been involved in Lucy's execution. "Commander," Turner's voice came through the communication system. "Captain Wright, we've secured the Planetary Government Center. We're collecting the officials who are part of the tribunal that ordered the child's execution." Danny nodded. "Good work, Commander. Signal Admiral Sullivan that the first phase is complete." The main screen switched to show Admiral Sullivan aboard her flagship. Behind her, Danny could see Robert and Linda Adams, Lucy's parents, watching the operation with quiet intensity. Excellent work, Captain Wright. Phase 2 is now active. All fleet commanders begin the systematic dismantling of Zephyrian military installations. What followed was unlike any military campaign in galactic history. The human fleet moved through Zephyrian space with methodical precision, but their targets weren't chosen for strategic value. They were chosen to send a message. Every installation that had been involved in Lucy's capture, transport, or execution was completely destroyed. Every official who had supported the decision was captured and brought before human tribunals. Every Zephyrian military unit that had participated was defeated and disbanded, but the most effective weapon wasn't the new ships or the Harmony disruptors. It was the psychological warfare campaign that Dr. Hayes had designed. Human Forces broadcast messages throughout Zephyrian space, showing images of Lucy Adams alongside the destruction of their military installations. The message was simple and clear. This is what happens when you hurt our children. The Zephyrians, who prided themselves on logical thinking and organized society, couldn't comprehend the human response. They kept sending messages offering to negotiate, to discuss terms, to find a logical solution to the conflict. The humans ignored every message. Commander Betty Miller led special operations teams that captured high-ranking Zephyrian officials. Under interrogation, they revealed the complete failure of their strategy. We calculated the human response based on previous encounters with other species, one captured general admitted. When we executed offspring of other species, they always withdrew and offered concessions. We expected the same response from humans. But you were wrong, Betty said. We were completely wrong. We did not understand that humans would sacrifice so much for one individual. Our psychological profiles were inadequate. The interrogation sessions were broadcast throughout Zephyrian space, showing their own leaders admitting their failure to understand humanity. As the campaign continued, other alien species throughout the galaxy watched with growing amazement. The humans weren't just defeating the Zephyrians, they were systematically dismantling their entire military and political structure. Captain, Lieutenant Johnson reported, we're receiving communications from other species. The Centauri Union wants to know if we need assistance. The Andromedan Free States are offering to mediate negotiations. Danny looked at the tactical display showing the systematic destruction of Zephyrian military power. Tell them we appreciate their concern. But this is a human matter. The Zephyrians killed one of our children. We will handle the response. On the screen, Admiral Sullivan appeared again. Captain Wright, we're approaching the Zephyrian capital system. Intelligence reports that Judge Kralsith, the official who ordered Lucy's execution, is there. Benny felt his hands tighten on the armrests of his captain's chair. Judge Kralsith was the alien who had looked into the camera and ordered a child's death. He was the one who had thought that killing Lucy Adams would terrify humanity into submission. Signal the fleet, Admiral. It's time to finish this. The human fleet moved toward the Zephyrian capital, 1,200 ships carrying the accumulated rage and determination of an entire species. Behind them, they left a trail of destroyed military installations and captured officials. The Zephyrians had wanted to send a message about power and fear. They had wanted to show humanity that they were weak and emotional. Instead, they had discovered that nothing in the universe was more dangerous than a species that would move heaven and earth to protect their children. And they were about to learn the final lesson about human nature. When you hurt a human child, humanity doesn't just want justice. They want you to remember why you should never do it again. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the ruins of the Zephyrian Capitol building, looking out at the city that had once been the center of a powerful empire. The tall spires and organized structures that had represented Zephyrian order and logic were now broken and silent. It had taken 6 months to complete the campaign. 6 months of systematic dismantling of everything the Zephyrians had built. Their military was gone, their government was captured, and their empire was no more. "Admiral," called Commander Alex Turner, approaching across the debris-filled plaza. "The final group of officials has been secured. Judge Kralseth is among them." Kate nodded. Judge Kralseth was the alien who had looked into a camera and ordered the execution of a little girl. He was the one who had thought that killing Lucy Adams would terrify humanity into submission. Where is he? In the holding facility with the other tribunal members. They're ready for the final proceedings. Kate made her way through the captured city to the building where the Zephyrian officials were being held. The streets were empty, except for human soldiers standing guard. The Zephyrian civilians had fled or gone into hiding, unable to understand what had happened to their ordered society. In the holding facility, Judge Kralseth sat in a simple chair, his tall gray form looking smaller than it had on the broadcast months ago. His large black eyes stared at the floor, and for the first time, Kate could see something like emotion in his expression. "Judge Kralseth," Kate said, sitting across from him. "Do you understand why we're here?" The alien looked up slowly. "You have destroyed our civilization over the death of one individual. This action is completely illogical." Even now, even after everything that had happened, he still didn't understand. That individual was a child, a 10-year-old girl named Lucy Adams. You killed her to send us a message. The action was calculated to demonstrate the consequences of human territorial violations. It was an effective strategy that had worked with other species. Kate leaned forward, but it didn't work with us. No, it did not work with humans. We miscalculated your species' response. Dr. Richard Hayes entered the room, carrying a tablet with psychological evaluation reports. "Judge Kralseth, we've spent months studying your species' decision-making process. We understand why you thought killing Lucy would make us retreat." The alien looked at the human scientist. "Explain." "Your species values logical thinking and organized society. Individual lives are less important than the stability of the group. You assumed all species think this way. This is correct. Individual survival is less important than societal order." Kate felt the cold rage that had driven her through the entire campaign. "You were wrong. Human children are not expendable. They are not tools to be used for political messages. They are the future of our species. This emotional attachment to offspring is a weakness that makes your species vulnerable to manipulation." Dr. Hayes shook his head. "No, Judge, this emotional attachment is what makes humanity so dangerous. You threatened our children, and we responded with the complete destruction of your civilization." Judge Kralseth was quiet for a long moment. The response was disproportionate. One individual life does not justify the destruction of an entire empire. "That's where you're wrong," Kate said. "That one individual life was worth everything to us. Lucy Adams was somebody's daughter. She was a little girl who loved her parents and wanted to go home. And you killed her on live broadcast to make a political point. The action was within our legal rights." "Your legal rights?" Kate repeated. "Let me tell you about human legal rights. Lucy Adams had the right to grow up, to go to school, to make friends, to have a family of her own someday. You took all of that away from her." Kate activated a holographic display showing images from the campaign. Destroyed Zephyrian installations. Captured officials, the systematic dismantling of their military. This is what happens when you hurt our children. This is the message we're sending to every species in the galaxy. Judge Kralseth looked at the images. "You have destroyed thousands of lives to avenge one." "Yes, and we would do it again." The alien finally seemed to understand. Your species is willing to sacrifice everything for your offspring. Not just our offspring. Any human child. Any human family. That little girl you killed represented every human child in the galaxy. When you hurt her, you hurt all of us. Dr. Hayes pulled up another display showing messages from other alien species. Judge, other civilizations have been watching this. Conflict. They're learning the same lesson you learned. And messages were from dozens of different species, all saying similar things. The Centauri Union had issued new directives protecting human colonies in their territory. The Andromedan Free States had established formal agreements guaranteeing the safety of human families. Even species that had been hostile to humanity were now offering diplomatic negotiations. You wanted to send a message, Kate said. Well, your message was received. But the response wasn't what you expected. Judge Kralseth stared at the displays showing the ruins of his civilization. We did not anticipate this level of retaliation. Because you don't understand what it means. To be human. You think our emotions make us weak. You think our love for our children is a vulnerability you can exploit. Kate stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the empty streets of the former Zephyrian capital. You were wrong about everything. Our emotions don't make us weak. They make us unstoppable when someone threatens what we love. A new voice spoke from the doorway. She's right. Kate turned to see Robert and Linda Adams entering the room. Lucy's parents had requested to be present for this final meeting. They looked older than they had 6 months ago, but there was something settled in their expressions, something that spoke of justice being done. Mr. and Mrs. Adams, Judge Kralseth said, recognizing them from the diplomatic files. Your offspring's death was a regrettable necessity. Linda Adams stepped forward, her voice quiet but steady. Her name was Lucy. She wasn't an offspring or a regrettable necessity. She was our daughter. She loved strawberry ice cream, Robert added. She wanted to be a teacher when she grew up. She was afraid of thunderstorms, but brave enough to stand up to bullies at school. Judge Kralseth looked confused. These details are irrelevant to the strategic considerations. No, Linda said. These details are exactly why your empire fell. You saw Lucy as a tool, as a way to send a message. We saw her as a little girl who deserved to live and grow up and have a future. Kate activated the final display, showing the memorial that was being built on the site where the Zephyrian government building had stood. It would be a simple monument with Lucy's name and a message that would be translated into every language in the galaxy. This memorial will remind everyone who passes here about what happens when you hurt human children. But it's not just about revenge, Judge. It's about making sure this never happens again. Dr. Hayes pulled up reports from across the galaxy. The psychological impact of this campaign has been enormous. Every alien species is reassessing their relationship with humanity. They understand now that humans will go to any length to protect their young. The Regellian Confederation has established new protocols for dealing with human families. The Vegan Trade Alliance has created special protection agreements for human children in their territory. Even the warlike Orion clans have agreed to exempt human civilians from their raiding activities. Judge Kralseth processed this information slowly. You have used our action as a catalyst to change galactic political relationships. We didn't plan it that way, Kate said. We just responded the way humans always respond when someone hurts our children. But yes, the galaxy is learning what that means. The door opened and Captain Jake Morrison entered. He had been promoted to admiral after the campaign, and he now commanded the peacekeeping force that would remain in former Zephyrian space. Admiral Sullivan, the final transport ships are ready. The remaining Zephyrian civilians will be relocated to the protected worlds as planned. Kate nodded. The humans weren't interested in ruling over the Zephyrian people. They had dismantled the Empire and captured the officials responsible for Lucy's death. but the ordinary citizens would be allowed to rebuild their lives under human protection. What about the tribunal members? They'll stand trial for war crimes. The galactic community has agreed to recognize the proceedings as legitimate. Judge Kralsith looked up at this news. War crimes? The execution of a child for political purposes violates every civilized standard in the galaxy, Kate explained. Even species that don't think like humans recognize that killing children is wrong. Linda Adams approached the alien judge. I want you to understand something. We didn't do this because we wanted revenge. We did this because no other parent should have to watch their child die the way we watched Lucy die. The pain you caused us was terrible, Robert added, but the fear that other children might face the same thing was worse. That's why humanity came for you. Judge Kralsith was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different. Less certain, less cold. I begin to understand. Your response was not about strategic advantage or territorial gain. It was about protecting future offspring from similar treatment. Now you're starting to get it, Kate said. Dr. Hayes closed. His reports. Judge, your species made a fun.